Welcome to Magnify Your Message. Inspiration magnified.
A plan is only good as its execution. I've seen things go boom, bang, and fly. So you never know what type of call you're going to get. It can be that active shooter LAX. It could be the fire in paradise. It could be a lightning strike. It could be an earthquake.
Today on Magnify Your Message, we are joined by Rick Crawford. Look, I got to tell you, this guy is soft spoken and humble, so he's not going to lead with his credentials. But I want you to know that Rick is the guy in charge of emergency crisis management for the U.S. Capitol and the Supreme Court. He's a battle tested 34-year veteran of the Los Angeles Fire Department, where he was a battalion chief. Rick has managed super high pressure situations, from directing emergency responses to planning for massive events like the LA Marathon and the Academy Awards. Again, he's super humble yet super accomplished. It's a magical combination. I hope you enjoy this episode. Rick Crawford, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me on, Cheryl. This is absolutely fabulous. So I'm looking forward to sitting down and breaking some bread with you here.
Amen to that. Tell us, who are you and what do you provide for people?
Well, I am a formerly now retired battalion chief with 34 years of experience with the Los Angeles Fire Department. I'm now the new incoming emergency/crisis management coordinator for the United States Capitol and Supreme Court. And, I teach people how to train like you fight, as I say. It's a principle for, emergency and crisis management to be able to prepare for a chaotic situation, but you have to train like the real incident is going to occur.
One of the things that most strikes me about you, Rick, is you deal with arguably the most unnerving, frightening, scary thing in the world, crisis management. And yet you're the most even keeled, level headed, centered, grounded individual that there is. And it's remarkable that you embody that. That's exactly, if I were to select who I'd want running crisis management for our nation, it would be you, with this disposition that you have and your intelligence and your pedigree. How in the dickens did you get into this in the first place?
Oh, as I say is, it's a long road from the bottom to the top. And I'm a guy from humble beginnings, growing up in South Central LA in the midst gangs and everything else in the 70s and 80s as a teenager. I had no idea this is where I would ascend to at some point. But with a long career over the spanning decades in the Los Angeles Fire Department, the crisis capital of the world, as I like to call it, I've been the earthquakes, fires, rainstorms, river rescues, even a plane crash at LAX in 1991. I've seen a lot. One of the things that you learn is you have to be calm and cool-headed under pressure. And so I kind of took that on as a mantra that I need to be able to process and be able to give direction. I have to be calm and cool-headed and be able to think clearly. So I kind of took that on as one of my things in my development. Didn't happen until later, but my pathway to this is just I use a term, what I call it, an acronym called depth. As became a cadet at 15 years old, I knew what I wanted to do, was never ever wavered. So I use depth, determined, execute the plan. I was persistent, persevered through all types of things, used my talents, and then never stopped the hustle. So with that, I was shy. I didn't go to college initially. And so I had a long career. I was dedicated to family. And turning point for me was one day a guy says to me, I was a dispatcher here at our 911 dispatch center. And he says, what are you doing here? Like, what do you mean? He was like, you're an intelligent guy. Like, you're bigger than taking 911 phone calls. Get out of here and go do something else with your life. And that was a kind of a turning point for me. So I ended on the leadership journey. My leadership journey took me through several different pathways to get to attain to become a chief officer. And so one of the quick little insert story here is I'm taking an exam and become a commanding officer. And I had just lost my dad and two brothers in 122 days. And yeah, separate things, all three different things. So just my storm of my life at the time. And so, but in order to lead by example, you have to be a good leader to be able to show up in the midst of your own personal adversity. I took my interview the day before the third death, my brother's burial at sea. And I scored the top score that day just because I wanted it. And they could tell I was rattled, but at the end of it, they asked me what's going on. I told them I have a burial at sea tomorrow, but I still showed up today.
Yeah.
And so that allowed me to start on to a speaking career with media and PIO and developing all these severe exact process to follow for crisis management. Use the train like you fight principle because I believe in training like you fight, and using my cool-headed through experience. I was able to have options with into my career, and I actually got asked by a person who sitting in the Harvard class about what my retirement plans were and if I wanted to come to the Capitol. So through that process, I went through it, and out of 168 applicants, I was the guy they selected. So off to Washington, D.C. I go. That's my nutshell.
I'm so sorry about your father and two brothers. And it seems like such an honoring of their legacy that rather than being stopped by that, you persevered through that. You excelled through that. What
Yeah.
a way to pay them back for all they'd provided for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It was, yeah. My dad actually wouldn't have allowed that. He would have told me to stop crying and actually get myself together and everything else. So, I knew that's what it would have hurt. So, yeah. So I knew I had to show up that day.
So you become a leader, and when you first stepped into your first leadership position, what's there in your head? I mean, do you think, are you having some kind of like identity crisis, like an imposter syndrome type thing? Or are you like saying to yourself, hey, I was born for this? What's going on in your head?
There's an age-old question: is are leaders made or are they born? Right. And more leadership books have been written than cookbooks. If you actually walk into a Barnes and Noble. So if there was a specific recipe, there would have been one written already. So for me, leadership is a combination of what's in the salad that fits you the best. And it's different for everyone else. So for me, part of my interesting question that you have is that when I told you I was at dispatch, I spent 18 years off of a fire truck, and I was in dispatch for 18 years. I decided to become a captain, an officer, and get into a leadership role. And I went back and became a student of Rick Crawford. I always say is if you're going to be a good leader, you have to be the subject matter expert of yourself. So before you can lead anyone else, you have to do what I call lead yourself first, LYF, live your life. So I got to know myself as a leader. I found out what my niche is in leadership, and it wasn't just about the fires, it was about the mentorship. And so I knew I was getting into what I call the people business. And so the business of people, meaning I have to chip them, sand them, and buff them to make sure that they are altered and get into their DNA to make change. Yes. So I found that niche. So I knew what my lane and my role was. I'm relatable. And so I use the power of conversation. And so that's how I found myself in a leadership role. And I knew what my lane was.
Mm-hmm. Now, you talked earlier about media and becoming a PIO. If any of you are listening and like, wait, let me brush up on my acronyms. Public Information Officer. How do you get tapped to be that person, the person who's disseminating all that info to the public? What an acknowledgement.
Yeah, it is. Earlier in my story, you mentioned I was a very shy guy. In high school, I didn't even didn't have a lot of friends. I was just just a shy guy, just stayed to myself a lot. So a very small circle of friends, didn't talk to people. But I realized that I'm in a line of work. I can't be that introverted guy kind of guy. Um, Through that, working on myself and
You
purposely
led yourself first.
myself first. And so being able to do that, I found myself speaking in front of a group of people on a disaster communications in Orlando. And so a person walked up to me and says, "Hey, have you thought about becoming a public information officer? You'd be great in front of media and TV, and you're kind of born for it." And I didn't think that was the case, but I, figured it out. I jumped in some media training at the very basic level. I did love the work, and so off I went. And I've been able to get in front of some of the most historical incidents in all of California, up and down the state of California, and within Los Angeles.
Are
So
you able to share what those incidents were?
sure, sure. Yeah, example is one of the more significant incidents was the Campfire in 2018, which is this fire, this historical fire burning in Northern California right now. It's right next door to it. And I mean, literally right next door. I mean, the same town is being evacuated. And so there was 86 fatalities in that incident. And so very significant fire because the weather played such a role in it. And I used a soundbite, what we call the tsunami of fire is what I called it. And so this fire had moved at the breakneck speed and burned 80,000 acres in less than 12 hours. And so, yes, so people were running to get out of the way. Very significant because at the end, as the fire went through, one of the things that I found was a group of neighbors who come together, put down some American flags on their birch tree and burned out houses and had a barbecue. And that to me showed the power of people and neighbors and being able to be together. So one of my great lessons learned was being at that incident.
What a gift. What a gift to be able to be that resilient. And if you're providing this critical info to the public, you're helping them do this. So, how long were you a public information officer? What else did that entail? I mean, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I was a public information officer for 10 years. And so my 2014 is when I became a public information officer. And what happens is there's a series of public information officer courses that, especially when you're in a government style job, that career path, that you start off with the very basic level, what they call a basic level public information officer class. And then there's tiers and advanced levels. And so what happens is once you get this course, you have to actually go to incidents and be sit to incidents. So you have to be willing to actually be gone for several days or weeks, sometimes maybe 2 weeks to an incident. And you're learning the craft because you start learning how to talk to people. One, there's people who have lost their homes, they've lost their loved ones, they're all their treasures. So you're kind of a consoler in chief. You are also the person who is going to give them the proper methodology to apply for assistance. So there's things that you're teaching the public, from a teaching perspective as well. And then there's getting in front of a camera. There's also talking on radio that you'll have. And so you may be pulled over, at any minute, and next, CNN will pull up or any other of the news stations will pull up and ask you for an interview. And so you have to know your information. And so you have become a student of a place you've never been to before. I'd never been to Chico, California, but I learned some history of the place. I learned how people operate and what's near and dear to them, historical landmarks. And so you have to be able to give that context when you are now in front of a national audience, and to be able to make sure that people understand the severity of the incident.
It doesn't escape me that as a public information officer, you're going to the heart of the exact place that everyone else is fleeing.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct.
So you round out your career with that, with the LA Fire Department, retire, and then what?
Well, with my leadership journey, is my niche. Talk to people. I teach people about leadership, about leading yourself first, about the people business, about chips and buff. And I use the term execute your plan because it's about having a roadmap for what you personally want to attain. And so that's one of my aspects of that. So, using the leadership piece along with being cool headed, under intense pressure with decision making, you now are going to attain certain levels of leadership courses and things like that. You have to put yourself in higher places, which example, how I put myself back through school, college, got to Harvard, got to higher level places where you have a larger audience. And so it's all about networking and being relatable. And so being able to take that now to the next level, I'm not done. I feel kind of like it's morning in my life. And so I have a lot more to do. I'm going to take this position, go to the crisis management level and see what I can do over here at the Capitol, make sure everyone stays safe. And I'm going to leave the future open to some other big things, but I love teaching people leadership and crisis management and staying calm under pressure. That's really a passion of mine.
It's so interesting that you say that. What I acknowledged you for at the beginning of our conversation was just from our experience and knowing one another, you seem like one of the most level-headed, calm, centered, grounded people I've ever met. I didn't realize until now that that's something upon which you've based your work. It's something you find pride in for yourself. No wonder it's such a gift to provide. How do you go from LA Fire Department and the leadership role you have there to managing the crisis management plans for the nation? Because there've got to be a lot of people in a similar role across the country, but you are leading. You've emerged as the de facto leader of all. That sounded slightly grandiose, but it isn't. Uh,
Yeah.
how?
Well, it's like this. Nothing beats personal experience, first of all. And so I don't live in a theoretical world. I've seen things go boom, bang, and fly, and so I'll give you an example. I'm working at the dispatch center. I'm back. I went back there as a captain, and I'm working at the dispatch center. And so one of the dispatchers takes a call from LAX, November 1st, 2014, and says, I hear shooting in the background. And so he tells me, and I said, okay. I says, is he still shooting? And he's listening. He says, yes, I can still hear the gunshots. Well, that's an active shooter at Los Angeles International Airport, Terminal 3. That's going on. Well, there's a specific process that you have to plan for to follow that. And in the midst of chaos, in the midst of people running out of the terminal and everything else, someone has to remain calm and cool-headed. So when you take the experience of that and you take the after action pieces of lessons learned, being able to get into a room of high level thinkers and people talking, experience relied upon is something that is just rare to follow and rare to have. So having my amount of experience, also having the ability to I've actually written these plans as well, has put me in a very unique position to to be able to handle large scale incidents. And written plans for the marathon, Academy Awards. We have championship parades, along with other major incidents that are happening. So we have the Olympics coming in 2028. I'm not there, but this is the type of things that Los Angeles is used to. So it's hard to find that combination of, I think, a combination of a person all wrapped up in one particular piece. I've been very fortunate I have that. And I think that it's been, appreciated for those at the Capitol to be able to come in and write something and put something together that keeps people safe. And we don't have, things of repeat issues of the past.
There's something that as I'm listening to you speak, it's so admirable. And we've spoken about this in the past, but there's a certain amount of humility that many people who provide a lot for the world have. And it's a wonderful trait to not be braggadocious or tooting your own horn or whatever. Aren't I fabulous? But at the same time, you must own your pedigree, your experience, your track record. And you do that in such a beautiful way in owning, I've done this, I do this. The what did you call LA Crisis Central?
The crisis
Call it
capital.
crisis capital. I mean, right? I don't there's like one of a couple places that has so much to manage, and you own it while never being arrogant about it, and it's just a winning combination. So now you've got execute your plan. You're helping huge entities like the US Capitol, the Supreme Court. What are you doing? What are you providing for individuals, companies, organizations? How else are you providing your work for people?
So, first of all, being able to bring the thought to it takes a company or university or large scale organization that doesn't have a crisis management plan, or they want to actually have one looked over. A third aspect is reviewing an incident that just occurred and find out what went right, what went wrong. And so, for me to be able to come in, assess, where the holes were, where they may be, we start with a risk assessment. And so providing a risk assessment, understanding the roles and responsibilities of an agency or organization that has a crisis management team, making sure those people have it. Most people have never seen a big incident, and they work for a college or an organization. They've never seen a fire actually happen. So I bring into the aspect of what you're supposed to do, but I test them under pressure. And so they understand that they're now going to get involved in a role and a responsibility to make sure that the company, their job is not to put the fire out. Their job is to make sure that the company continues to function, is what crisis management is about after the incident is over and it has minimal disruption. My job is to bring in the right intensity, make sure people have an understanding of what their roles and responsibilities are during the crisis, formulate a crisis management communication strategy so you get in front of the story, and then also being able to assess yourself at the end of what went right, what went wrong. My job is to bring that intensity, make sure that they understand, their emotions that are going to be involved. I'll give you an example. Is if you take Columbia University, an example is the night that the incident started, they were outside. I'm not criticizing Columbia in any form or fashion, but example, something was starting to brew, right? And so when that happens, there should have been a notification that goes out to a team that says, hey, we have a minor problem. You monitor it. As it grows, there's a team of 8, 10, 12 people that spring into action, has specific roles and responsibilities to do. A plan is only good as its execution. Hence the term execute your plan. So that's what we bring to the table, to make sure that it's executed as written, but it's adaptable to any challenge that you're going to have, that you're faced with.
To be able to do the critical thinking in anticipation of a crisis seems like it's one part experience, one part soothsayer, one part psychic. Like, how do you bring all that together? The closest that I think we come to it is when there's some tragedy like a school shooting, and they say, "Oh, the police didn't act quickly enough. The so and so hesitated, or these people didn't do their job," but it's more like trying to find someone to pay. What do you do? How do you come up with the answer before something like that happens?
So, if you actually think about, so working at a 911 dispatch center, for an example, for as long as I have, I used to use the term there would be a beep that would comes in a dispatcher's ear, and then the call would drop in. And I would say, you never know what's on the other end of the beep. Okay. So you never know what type of call you're going to get. It can be that active shooter LAX. It could be the fire in paradise. It could be a lightning strike. It could be an earthquake. It can be any of those things. It doesn't matter what the incident is. There's a process that you have to follow to get yourself up and running to handle the crisis. And my job is to make sure that you understand the process. An example, as a supervisor, commanding officer running the 911 dispatch center, as soon as an earthquake happens in Southern California, the first thing we do is we make sure that we're functioning and we can receive 911 calls, and we check all the other dispatch centers to make sure that people we're connected with can receive them. No matter how hard the ground shakes, that's what we're going to do. Okay. Once we figure that out and that process is in place, now we go through a process of making sure all the fire trucks are out of the fire stations, and we do a check of damages and everything else, no matter what. So it's muscle memory. So instead of trying to predict what type of emergency you have, you treat every emergency the same. No matter how severe it is, you have to get those processes up and running. So I bring that same type of mindset to a university, that same type of mindset to a business. From an individual standpoint is when I talk about evacuation preparation for your home, preparing your home for a fire. Expect if you live in a zone, there's wildland, you're going to have a fire. Don't think it won't happen to you. It can, and it will. So I train people to think that way. So it's now you put together a process, you train with your family as if like you fight, because when the incident happens, you don't want to be driving through smoke or driving through rain and you're wondering which street to go down. Practice your evacuation routes. So I bring that to the individual, but also to the higher level organizations that have a large number of employees.
This is absolutely fascinating. Just anecdotally, I was talking to a friend last week who deals with some severe physical challenges, who said, I'm prepared for an emergency until the point where I'm not. And I said, well, what does that mean? I've got water, cash, non-perishable food. I've got a hand cranked radio. I don't remember the other things she had, a generator, etc.
She sounds prepared.
And right, knowing that she relies upon, she can't necessarily go out and run to get something. She needs to have all those things. And she said, unless it's an earthquake and the freeways go down, and then I'm trapped. So
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing, and then there's literally nothing I can do. And I thought, well, could I help? And I'd like to think of myself as a fairly intelligent person. She said all the city streets will be jammed. We're in Southern California as well. Uh, all the streets will be jammed. If the freeways are down, like happened in the Northridge quake, there's literally nothing to do. I will be trapped and I will just die here when my food runs out. And I thought, God, how does one prepare for that?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I was a firefighter during the Northridge earthquake, and 4:30 in the morning, I was already getting ready for work, and I had to drive to work that morning. I get to work, the fire station doors are wide open. Everything in the fire station was out on the floor where all of the fire trucks were parked, and my fire truck was gone. They were already working. So I happened to jump on a reserve fire truck, and we go to work, and we were there for several days preparing for that. Well, sounds like she has all of the right things in place, right? Those things that for sustainability for herself, because she expects not to get help. That's what that
Mhm.
sounds like to me. The person that does that is what I call luck favors the prepared.
Wow.
And when you're prepared, you're the person that's not in the frenzy on the line, even if she didn't have any disabilities. You're the person that's not looking for the shortages on the shelves down the line. You're not the one looking for cash at the ATM. When you have all of those things, even if you miss one or two, there probably won't be life threatening. So again, she expects this to happen. So therefore, you know, things will probably work out in her favor. So instead of, thinking of Well, it may not happen. I'll react for it at the time. That's not a plan. That's a wish. And go without a plan. It's just a wish, right? So she's looks like she's in the right place. She has the right mindset. And so to have all of those things because she expects it to happen. That's the difference between life and death and success and failure when it comes to, crisis management planning. Expect it to happen.
That wow, that's a hell of a mindset challenge to expect the crisis to happen and that yet remain present and balanced and equanimous and happy in the present. You geez, just you're blowing my mind. Maybe it's because I have the crisis management plan bingo, right? That
That's
I
the
can
key.
be happy now and
That's
present.
you can calm and relax. You can go about your business. You don't have to worry about what's going to happen. It's the difference if you wrote a living trust, right? It's like as everything's in place, there's nothing that's there's nothing to fret about. Like
Oh,
go about your life. You're ready for it. Okay. It's like that's the whole point. Stress comes when you're not prepared. So you have to build that. And you know what? You need to pass this down to your relatives, build, preparation ecosystem in a sense. And so I use this term ecosystem of leadership, and that means I build a proper, garden of thinkers that is going to be able to adapt, have adaptable challenges, but they repeat the process along the way. And so, when it comes to preparation, it's no different.
wow. My friend left it with, unless my house is destroyed and my car is destroyed or and how does one even is there any kind of ecosystem that allows for that if you're cut off from
Well,
people?
it's a great question. And to your point, what it is that, and I go back to evacuation, right? um, some of those things that, you and I've discussed this in the past about, right, having things ready to go. So one, make sure you number one, know where all your important paperwork is. Okay. Make sure you have an understanding. You don't have to look for that particular stuff. Have a go back pact. If you're in Southern California, the ground is going to shake at some point. If you're in California, we all know that. It's just a matter of time. If you live in Florida, a hurricane is going to hit at some point. Okay. If you live in Indiana, your ground's probably not going to shake very much. Okay. And not have a hurricane. But if you're in a hurricane prone area, earthquake zone, east or west coast, tornado alley in the middle of the country, it's probably going to happen at some point. Probabilities. With your evacuation piece, you have to have a place to go. If you're leaving your house, you expect maybe to come back to nothing. That's where robust insurance policies have those things in place. And then the last piece is learn. I teach people this: learn how to apply for FEMA assistance. Go to FEMA.gov. It tells you exactly what to do. And so you're now not, you print that out, you have that with you. You're not stressing about how to even apply for it. That creates even more stress. I'll leave you this quick example. If you decided tomorrow to go and purchase a home and apply for a mortgage and you haven't put together one document and they ask you for 15 things, the stress isn't buying the home. The stress is in looking for the paperwork, right? So
Right.
what did I do with those bank statements or those things? If they're at easy, handy at your palm of your palm of your hand, boom, it's a much easier process.
I could speak to you for hours, and I'm sure everyone listening feels like you could listen to Rick for hours. You are a wealth of information. Thank you for sharing it with us today. How can people find out more about you and the work that you do?
Well, you can go to my website on www.executeyourplan.net, net. And you can, go to my website, read about my story, about crisis management and how I can help you. And also be able to, take a look at my upcoming book, Ecosystem of Leadership, that'll be coming out as well. And so you'll learn a little bit more about my leadership journey there.
Fantastic. I'll make sure everything is included in the liner notes of the episode. What would you like to leave people with today, Rick?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you. It's been an amazing journey. Thanks to you and everything else, I'm just so much more comfortable with, my media side of things, bringing my own personality out and some things that you just have brought to the table that's actually a great thing, right? Don't hide myself. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. But just, just like to leave people with, again, luck favors the prepared. And, proper planning prevents poor performance. And it's just one way to make sure you stay safe out there. Our world has a lot of challenges out there right now, and you never know what's going to be around the corner. But again, you'll be able to sleep peaceful at night if you have the proper plan in place.
You are a gem. Thank you for sharing your insight, your intelligence, your wisdom with us.
Awesome. Thank you, Cheryl. Super appreciate being here.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode of the Magnify Your Message podcast. A huge thank you to Rick Crawford for sharing his incredible insight on crisis management and handling the emergencies in our own lives. I hope you found Rick as informative and inspirational as I did. If you want to learn more about Rick and his work, just click the links in the episode notes for more. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with everyone that you feel it would benefit. Thank you in advance. And when you're ready to share your story and your work with the world, I can help. Visit CherylHunter.com to learn how. I am Cheryl Hunter, and until next time, know that your message has the power to change the world.